I'm Ashy, and today we're going to talk more about travel sketching or travel art or travel journaling, whatever you want to call it. But today I'm going to give you the lessons that I've learned while I do this in real life. So let's go ahead and flow right into the conversation. So the first thing is that I've learned that the setup needs to be really simple. For me personally, I need a really low barrier of entry. If there's any friction, I'm not going to do it. So I have kind of put together my own kits for traveling with watercolor. And if you're interested in specifically what's in those kits, you can, after you watch this video and learn my tips, you can actually just watch the video that I'm going to link at the end screen that has my 3 different setups for travel watercolor, depending on the size that I want, basically, and how light I want it to be, because I'm not going to carry very much stuff if I'm walking a lot. Just saying. So this is more about, making sure that that barrier of entry is low. So I have a plan for how I'm going to draw or paint in different situations, in different settings. So if that's in the car, I know where I'm going to put my water in the cup holder. I have a plan. I have my rag so that if water spills or I need to tap my brush, it's right there and it's all together. And so I've thought through that setup. If I'm painting outside, I know how I'm going to set up if I sit on the ground or on a bench. Or, if I just want to sketch something really quick, I'm going to be standing. I have my favorite pencil and pens that I keep with my sketchbook that I can just grab and quickly open the sketchbook and just start. No barrier at all. You can do something, for 2 minutes and it's not going to take you 6 minutes to set up, right? If you only have 15 minutes to paint, you don't want half of that to be your setup time. So making sure that you've thought through that beforehand is very helpful for when you actually go. It also will help you determine what actual supplies you need, because again, this is about real life travel sketching, travel art. I know I'm traveling with my family, my kids. I got a 6 and an 8-year-old, my husband, extended family. And I am not going on trips for dedicated art retreats or just solo trips where I'm going to paint. And so keeping the supplies more minimal for me is what works. Maybe that doesn't work for you. Maybe you have a different setup that you prefer, but thinking through what you might actually use so that you don't have that moment where you're staring at all your supplies that you brought and overwhelmed and don't know what to grab, so you just don't do it. So don't get into paralysis of analysis, I think is the phrase. So just make sure that you've thought through that setup beforehand. So my second tip is to paint the memory, not the scene. So this goes into more the actual act of painting. So when you're thinking through the composition choices, the color choices, all of that, you don't have to be super detailed and precise. Just take in what you see around you and paint the vibe. So I have a few examples here from a recent trip I took just this weekend. Actually, I went to the lake with my parents, my kids, and my husband. Okay. And so I painted these very simply, very loosely, very quickly, and I didn't consider that much about the color choices or even the composition. I just started putting paint on paper, and it was about painting the memories. So this was painted in the car, on the way home from a museum, on the way back to my parents' house from a museum, right? So I just saw the clouds in the sky and I started with that, and they're not perfect. Might go in and add some more shadow, but I wanted to capture, it was mostly sunny that day and there were these big puffy, almost cartoony looking clouds. And then the forest areas were very dense, but the light was shining in certain areas and capturing those bright, more yellow, orangey leaves. And that's what I wanted to capture. So that's what I captured. This was in the car. We were driving. This was not a specific scene. This was just a memory and a vibe of what I was seeing at the time, right? Same with this lake scene. I left out all of the houses. I put in 3 houses. Well, there's houses all along this lake, and I just left them out because they didn't matter to the memory, right? The memory was the movement on the water, the dock that was, or the pier that was there, the deep greens of the trees, and the fact that we were at the beach. That's what mattered, right? So not every mix is going to matter. Not every detail in the scene is going to matter. Paint the vibe, paint the memory. Don't worry about painting every single detail. You can always simplify the details. You can leave things out, you can move things. If you like something better somewhere else, just move it. If you didn't fit it in and you wanted to include it, just put it in the scene anyway. Who cares, right? So it's your memories of the place. It's not a realistic necessarily representation of the place, especially when it's travel sketching. It's not necessarily about completing finished pieces. You can absolutely sit down, spend a couple hours or however long you have to do a completed piece. But when that's not the goal, just don't stress over it. The whole point is that it's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to be a little bit of a break, and it's supposed to be capturing a memory. Another thing with this is I find that, I just kind of use whatever mixes are already on my palette. My travel sketching kits don't have that much mixing space, and I don't worry about it if I like cross-contaminate colors or use more of the neutrals that are already on the page. It's going to create interest in the painting anyway. My personal setup, again, you can look at it at the very end. You can watch that video, but for the most part, they're pretty limited palettes. So I'm not going to necessarily create mud anyway. And those neutral mixes are a lot of times going to create more natural and cohesive paintings anyway. So I don't worry about it in general. I worry about it even less when I'm travel painting. Just use what's on your palette. Throw paint on paper. That is the point. My next tip is that you don't necessarily need to have time to do a full completed composition to enjoy painting while you travel. You can do little vignette paintings, just little snippets of the scene. You can do little sketches of the scene in ink or in pencil. You can always draw out a full scene in pencil if you want, and then go back and paint it later if you didn't want to get your paints out at the time. So there's all sorts of different options for creating that's not sitting down and doing a full-blown composition. So, in this sketchbook, these were technically more completed paintings, right? They're not detailed or anything, but they're complete paintings. But if you don't have time for that, that's okay. So I have some other examples. So this was on this trip as well. We went to a children's science museum, and we were there for a few hours. Okay, the kids are running around playing, messing with everything. It was a very fun place in Hot Springs. I don't even remember what it's called, but it was very fun. And, I was interacting with my kids. I was playing with them. My dad did a thing that shocked me. That wasn't so fun. But I was there and enjoying the experience. But there were things that caught my eye sometimes. And so what I did is I just pulled out this little tiny sketchbook and stood and drew those things in ink, right? And then, so this was the first thing I saw. I saw this little sea sponge. It was like pictures of the full thing, and then it magnified on the other side to show the difference and like to see what the details looked like. And I really liked that sea sponge, so I drew it, and it took I added details later. So this was very loose, very minimalistic when I was there. It probably took me 3 minutes, okay? And then the kids there was this big ice block that they would touch, and then they'd go over to this like thermal sensor thing, and it would show the different color patterns, right? So it'd be darker where it was cold, and the oranges and yellows and reds where it was warmer. And so I drew a cold hand. So the dark hatching is all where it was cold, right? And so that caught my eye, and the kids played with that for a while, and I didn't want to get my hands cold, so I didn't want to touch the ice block. So instead I drew their hands, sort of. And this is a very loose interpretation. That's nobody's hand. That's mostly from memory. But it's a loose interpretation, and I just labeled it cold hands. So it's a memory, right? And then the kids, they had like this indoor maze playground thing. So they went in circles on that a lot. And so while they were doing that, because I didn't fit in it, it was for kids. I just drew these other things that they had. They had a huge crystal boulder, basically. So I drew some of the crystals. I drew this like cross section of a stalagmite, and then I had planned to put something here, and I ran out of time, so I didn't. And that's okay. This is my memory of the museum with my kids. And these sketches took, 3 to 6 minutes each, probably. So I didn't have to miss any of the time on the trip, right? The trip for me, again, this wasn't an artist retreat or a painting trip for me. This was spend time with my kids, my husband, and my family. And I can still pull out a few minutes for myself or while I'm still interacting and just do some sketching while I'm at it to remember it. Another example is here. So this was a fountain outside of our local library. So we were going to the library. I had a bag we check out 50 books at a time when we go to the library because my kids read a lot. So I had a bag of 50 books, very heavy, my purse, and we were walking past the fountain that they have out there, and I was like, I kind of want to sketch it. So I just did this in pencil, and it took less than 10 minutes. It had to be less than 10 minutes. It was over 100 degrees out. I had the kids with me. I had the bag of books. We were walking back to the car. Like, this did not take very long to sketch out, and I didn't worry about perspective that much or precision. I just drew what I saw, and then I even went back and actually edited the lines later. So the key was, I wanted to capture the lions and some of the stones, like to remember the shape. That was it. And then when I had time, I went back and refined it. So that's another option. Just take your pencil, sketch, and when you have time, go back and refine it. This page is not done. I did the same thing. I went to this big old party in Fort Worth and was sitting at the table while we were snacking on our appetizers or whatever you call them, hors d'oeuvres. And I just started sketching the things that I saw around me. And you can see I've only painted 2 of them. Eventually I'll probably paint more. But, it's just little tiny sketches to capture the moment. So especially, again, if you're traveling with people and it's not a dedicated travel sketching trip or art trip, think in terms of moments, not paintings, not compositions. Just capture the moments that you want to remember for yourself by taking the time and attending to it and drawing it, even if it's only 4 or 5 minutes. It's actually going to ingrain that memory more than if you would have just let that go by without observing it, basically. So don't feel like you, again, necessarily have to pull out everything, do everything, spend 10, 20, 30 minutes, 3 minutes here, 6 minutes there, and you can have a really cool page in your sketchbook to remember your trip by. So another tip I have is to use the tools at your disposal. So drawing from life can sometimes be intimidating. Painting from life can be intimidating, but you have tools at your disposal. You can use your phone and take a picture, use it as a viewfinder to figure out what composition is going to work the best for you. Use it with grid lines so that you can see kind of where things are going to be placed if you want to keep it more accurate to the scene. The other thing is that looking through the phone, it gives you that sense of flattening the image. So it takes that 3-dimensional space down to a 2-dimensional picture basically on your phone, right? And so then it can sometimes be easier to translate the scene onto your page from a picture than from life. And, even master painters used to do this back in the day. They would use picture planes. They would have different tools that they used to quote unquote flatten the image so that it's easier to see, okay, this angle is up from vertical or up from horizontal or down, and to develop that perspective on the page. So use the tools that you have at your disposal. The other thing that I find that taking a picture can be really helpful for is if, you're painting a little bit longer, then the lighting's going to change. The people in the scene obviously are moving and changing. And so if you want to capture some of those specifics, then taking a picture can help just jog your memory for where those things were or what those things looked like. So you can combine both. Look at the scene in front of you in real life and look at the photo and go back and forth and use the tools at your disposal. But the phone is definitely helpful for that. And my kind of biggest tip is don't let painting make you miss out on the trip. Again, my travel painting is not art retreats. That's not the purpose of the trip. I have my family. my kids, and the whole point is to spend time with family. And for me, the whole point of painting while I'm doing that is to stay in the moment, to capture my memories in painting, and to basically kind of stay off scrolling, or, we kind of get into these moments where we have some downtime waiting for food to come or whatever. I don't want to be on my phone. I want to, personally, I find it setting a better example for my kids if I have my phone away and I'm doing something else, right? With my hands or my brain, rather than just doom scrolling. So I try not to let the painting get in the way of that. So it's a balance, right? And so again, just finding those natural windows of opportunity to paint is really helpful. So for me, this trip that I just took to the lake, few minutes at the museum to sketch out, right? Then in the car, I wasn't driving. Don't worry. In case you were wondering, I wasn't driving. My husband was driving. So taking that time, that's downtime. What are we going to be doing? We're chatting. I was participating in conversation. I was sitting with my daughter in the very back seat, and we were talking and engaging, but I was painting while I was doing that instead of maybe looking at my phone or having my phone out, right? At the lake, I would say my parents were playing with the kids. If my parents weren't there, I would have not been doing this painting, because I would have been in the water with my kids, because they're 6 and 8. They need somebody in the water with them. The other thing is that this painting didn't take me very long, but it did take the whole time that we were at the beach, because the kids got over the beach super quick and decided they wanted to go out on the boat earlier. So if we would have been there longer, I finished this painting. This painting is done. I was about to put it away and go to the water, and they said they were done. So I would have participated more with them at the beach after this was done, but the timing just didn't work out. This one I did when we were out on the boat ride, and I didn't take the whole boat ride to do it. I did this on the way out, and then the whole way back, I just sat, put it away, enjoyed the breeze off the water, enjoyed the sun was starting to go down a little bit, not quite setting, but is sinking, and just enjoyed the time. And my daughter, my 6-year-old, came and laid with me and cuddled with me, so that was always nice. So it didn't take up the whole time. So finding those moments, those windows of opportunity to incorporate it. Another thing that I found, and this isn't necessarily with traveling, but just out and about, my kids sometimes just take absolutely forever to eat, and it drives me insane. So if I'm done eating and they're still eating, I will pull out my sketchbook and sketch sometimes. So I actually have an example of that here. They were taking forever to eat, and so I just sketched them. And then again, I went back and painted it later. This wasn't something that I painted and finished there. I don't even think I finished the sketch there. I think I added some of the elements later, but I got the general gist while we were there. So just taking those windows, if you were gonna pull out your phone, pull out your sketchbook instead, and a pencil or a pen, and just draw something instead of pulling out your phone, right? Even if it's 3 minutes, that gives you time to capture something small. You can capture a coffee cup or, whatever, just something, right? Instead of pulling out the phone. And that's kind of how I approach it. Another tip I have, and this is specific for when you're traveling with kids. So obviously I'm at that point in my life, not everybody is, but traveling with kids. I didn't do it on this trip because my parents were here mostly, and the kids were entertained by them pretty much the whole time. But when we went to the Grand Canyon, I did do this. So when we got to the top, we went through the visitor center and everything, and then there was a place on the side with just a really nice view. And so we sat down, and I gotta find the painting. There we go. And I took sketchbooks for my kids as well. And then they did have their own little palette. And I had like a little bag of markers and some different things, but they had their sketchbooks as well. And we sat down and we took maybe 20 minutes to paint. One thing I would recommend, I'm not sure that I did this. I don't think I did, but I might have. Set a timer. So you can say, okay, we're going to sit down 20 minutes and this is our painting time, right? And for my kids at least, and I think for a lot of kids, they find it very exciting to do what you're doing, right? So by making this hey, we're all going to paint this scene together, let's sit down and paint. It's not now, well, now we have to sit and wait for mom to paint. Now it's we're all painting and doing something together and enjoying our time together. So I do recommend kind of setting a limit on it. Also, that makes it a little bit, I mean, if your kids are like my older one, she'll sit forever and do something, but my younger one will not. And so by having the time limit on it, it's like, oh, I got to get this done in this time. And so she focuses more. She's not as distracted, not quite as bouncy. And it makes it a little bit more novel too, because you have a limited amount of time. This isn't something that we're doing constantly. This isn't something that we're doing for 6 hours. This is something we have 20 minutes. Let's get something down. Let's see what we can make. What can we capture of the scene, right? And so that's another way that you can incorporate your family time into your drawing time that I found. And then kind of my finest, I don't know what that meant. My final little bonus tip is that people will probably approach you while you're drawing or painting in public. So this can be a bit intimidating at first, especially, if you don't feel like you're really good at it, or you're trying something new that you haven't tried before and you're not sure how it's going to turn out, or if you're just more introverted like me. I'm not super extroverted. I'm definitely introverted. And so engaging with random strangers is not necessarily my cup of tea. So it can be a little bit intimidating. But the thing to remember is they're not approaching you trying to interrupt you or trying to be rude. They're approaching you because they're genuinely curious and interested in what you're doing. They probably have not seen somebody out painting or sketching in public before, because it's not super common. And so they're probably a little bit excited that you're doing this, and it's something that they haven't seen before, and that you're choosing to do something with your time versus, again, just being on your phone or looking down, or, whatever people typically do when they're out and about. And so the thing to remember is that they're just genuinely curious. The other thing is, most of the time, they're very complimentary. Even if you think your painting sucks, they're going to probably say, wow, that's so cool. That's so good. And even if they don't think your painting's good, they're probably going to say something complimentary, like, that's so cool that you're painting out and about, or, something like that. Most people are not just going to be like, oh, that kind of sucks. What are you doing? People don't do that in real life. On the internet, people do that in comments behind a screen name, but not in real life. They're going to probably say something about how cool it is. And you can choose to glance up, say, thank you so much, and look back down at your page and continue what you were doing. It is not rude to just acknowledge, say thank you, and not engage further if you don't want to engage further. Again, that's what I typically do. I'm not one to try to necessarily prolong that interaction, and that's okay. And they don't necessarily expect it, right? It's just, hey, that's really cool. Hey, thanks. And then I go back to what I'm doing. That moment of, okay, I made eye contact, I acknowledged what you were saying, and looking back down at the paper triggers to them. It's that, body language response that, okay, thank you. This interaction is now over, right? Again, not in a rude way, just in a, okay, I'm going to go back to what I was doing now. Or you can choose to engage with them. You might say something a little bit more. Oh, thank you so much. Are you from here? Or, if you want to engage with them, they'll probably be willing to engage with you. They might ask you questions. They might, want to know more about what you're doing. And that can be really fun sometimes too. I've done that a couple times just locally when I'm at the park with the kids painting, where I've actually had more conversations with some of the other parents about it. And that can be fun too. It's not generally what I do. Generally, I say thank you and look down. But so just, I don't want that to be a barrier for you either, right? The whole point of this is decrease the barriers of entry to sketching in public, sketching while traveling, painting while traveling. And so somebody coming up and saying something about your work, I don't want it to be a barrier for you. Generally, they're going to be nice. They're not going to be rude. They're just going to ignore you if they're going to be rude. And you can choose to just say thank you and go back to what you were doing. So if you don't want to engage, don't, right? And so don't let it be a barrier, and also just enjoy it. people are excited that you're doing something different. So that's kind of fun sometimes. So kind of to summarize my points, I'm not sure if I think there's like 5.5. The first one is to make your painting setup kind of second nature. So take what you need and make sure you know kind of what you're going to do with it in that moment. So when you only have a couple minutes, you can do it. The second one is to paint the memory, not the scene. The third one was to make sure that you can capture those little small moments. It's the moments that matter, not the scene and not the composition. The third is to use the tools that you have available to, again, lower that barrier of entry, make it easier, make it fun. The whole point is fun. It's not anything else. And so use tools that you have at your disposal. And the last one is to let art add to your trip and travel journey, not take away from it. I really hope that you found this list helpful and enjoyed it. If you did, please give the video a like. Also comment any tips that you have. I'd love to hear any tips that you have down below that I have missed or that I could learn from. So just start a conversation down there. I do read and pretty much respond to nearly every comment. So let me know what you have that you found that works for you for travel sketching or drawing or painting. And also, again, check out the video here for my travel setups. Thank you again so much for watching, and until next time, keep those paints flowing.